And fire, rims and tires, bulletproof glass inside is the realest driver.
I'm still thinking about Jay-Z and Nas both being part of bids to get casinos in New York City. Do you know how big that is? Drop on the clues bombs for
That is
Jay-Z and
amazing.
Nas.
That's really
I don't think
brilliant.
people understand because they so rich and they be doing so much.
What have you really known about Nas? The king of hip-hop in New York, an immortal monument of the East Coast, the man who once shook the entire order of the entertainment industry. But even that is still not enough. Behind that spotlight lies a private world few ever get to see. A farm spanning more than 100 acres large enough to build nearly 50 football fields. A West Coast mansion guarded around the clock 24/7. And a net worth exceeding $80 million placing Nas in the top 0.1% of the wealthiest people in America. We are not here to forget that Nas was once a tax fugitive pursued by the FBI. So what was it that allowed him to flip the board so spectacularly? Do not look away. We are about to step into the hidden retreat of a hip-hop king and expose how Nas quietly built his multi-million-dollar empire. But before that, let us return to Queensbridge, back when Nas was still living under a fragile roof long before owning prime land in Georgia. Nas the child of Queensbridge. Nas was born on September 14, 1973 in Queensbridge, New York. But saying it that way is far too gentle. Queensbridge is not the kind of place where you grow up. It is a place where you survive day by day, like standing beneath a concrete bridge, while constantly hearing metal grind against metal. As a child, Nas was more of a street scholar than a classroom student. He dropped out of school at just 13, but that did not mean learning stopped. It simply shifted into another form. The streets freestyle circles hip-hop culture. His older brother Jabari Jungle Jones brought Nas into the world of rap, introducing him to local battle scenes in Queens. Not long after Nas began to stand out, raw, poetic, and real. And he realized this was the path he wanted to follow. Career turning point. The door opens. In 1991, while most guys his age were still scrambling to figure out life, Nas stepped straight into history with just one verse. Live at the Barbecue, released with Main Source, was not a hit. It felt more like an electric shock. Short, powerful, unannounced. Nas's verse made listeners stop mid-track as if someone had just said out loud what they themselves never dared to say. That single verse blew the doors of the music industry wide open. Then came 1994. At only 20 years old, Nas released Illmatic, and the entire rap world froze. Critics called it a masterpiece. The New York Times praised him as a poet of hip-hop. Rolling Stone ranked it among the greatest rap albums of all time. No noise, no gimmicks. Just a cold acknowledgement that New York had a new voice. Nas was crowned quietly. But that very moment also placed a massive shadow on his shoulders. Fame is never a smooth road. By the late 1990s, Nas entered a period of turbulence. Label drama, shifting musical trends, and the infamous feud with Jay-Z. It all peaked in 2001 with Ether. A diss record not just about winning or losing, but about reclaiming position. It sent shockwaves through the entire hip-hop culture. Ether did not just save Nas's career, it cemented his legacy. After everything, the feud ended in mutual respect. But by then, Nas had entered another tier. Not just a rapper, a pillar. As many of his peers faded, Nas pivoted. Quietly, deliberately. He invested in startups, technology, and real estate. He got in early on names like Ring, later acquired by Amazon and Coinbase. The pen that once wrote about the streets now read the market. Those verses turned into long-term deals. By the 2010s, while others clung to old glory, Nas was building wealth for generations. Beyond focusing on art, Nas learned another game, the business game. He invested in startups, tech companies, and real estate. By the 2010s, as many artists slowly faded, Nas was pulling in major returns from deals with Ring, later acquired by Amazon and Coinbase. His business instincts were as sharp as his rhymes. That dual identity artist and entrepreneur began shaping the lifestyle he lives today. See who dares say, dropping out means you are destined to fail in life. Nas is proof of relentless effort paying off. But I am not encouraging anyone to just drop out and chase money either. With knowledge, making money becomes much faster and easier. Now back to the story. In 2021, he won his first Grammy with King's disease. Not an explosion, a confirmation. Nearly 30 years later, Nas's voice still demands attention. He does not chase trends, he evolves. And it is that stubbornness, adaptability, and vision that carried Nas from the cramped corridors of Queensbridge into the open spaces of Decatur, Georgia. Welcome to the quiet empire of Nas. Decatur, Georgia, a southern retreat paradise. The first thing you notice as you drive down the long road leading in is the overwhelming scale. Nas's Decatur estate stretches across acres of lush green land rolling hills, gently unfolding sitting on a thin line between a southern farm and the private domain of a mogul tired of city lights. Insiders call it Decatur Farm. No nameplate, no flashy gate. Nas is believed to have purchased this property in the late 2010s as his music career entered a new chapter and his investments began yielding clear returns. The purchase price. A figure enough to make anyone swallow hard. Local real estate estimates put it at around $5 to $6 million. And do not be too surprised. That is just the land and the house. No one dares add the costs of design interiors, landscaping, and maintaining a property that operates like a self-contained ecosystem. Go ahead and double that number. That is not an exaggeration because I am about to show you why it makes perfect sense. The main house carries classic southern architecture painted in deep earth tones, with a porch so wide it does not invite you to sit down, it forces you to slow down. This is not a weekend getaway, this is real living. There are horse stables, crop gardens, barns large enough to look like they came straight out of a high-end lifestyle photo book. A living asset, not a display piece. Inside luxury, never shouts. Everything is subdued, heavy, and layered. Wooden floors run through expansive spaces, displaying artworks Nas has collected or directly supported from young artists of color. The living room is large enough to hold close friends, a creative crew, or a jam session that lasts until dawn. Floor-to-ceiling glass doors open to Georgia's endless green, reminding you the outside world still exists, but there is no need to rush. The kitchen makes another statement. High-end appliances sit alongside rustic farmhouse details, reclaimed wood beams, copper pots hanging on the walls. A massive kitchen island where Nas is said to cook host friends and talk about life more than music. There is even a private wine cellar with over 500 bottles of premium wine aged and ready to uncork. Outside, the land unfolds like a world of its own. Vegetable gardens large enough to last a year. Neatly lined fruit trees. Chicken coops so clean they look more like a resort than a farm. Horses roaming freely across open fields. And somewhere out there, a fishing pond where Nas can disappear for hours. No phone, no bodyguards standing close. Just water and the beats looping in his head. To keep this place running, Nas's team operates with military precision. Just cleaning the main house alone takes 3 straight days. 3 days just to bring everything back to what they call Nas standard. That says it all. This is not flexing. This is scale. Decatur Farm is not where Nas escapes the world. It is where he filters it. Only those close enough know the way in. And that discretion is exactly what makes the name Nas intimidating. Not because of how much money he spends, but because he knows where to spend it. But this is not the full picture yet. If Decatur represents stillness, then out west there is another property that reflects the other side of Nas, a symbol of urban luxury, the Calabasas Mansion, the crown jewel of the West Coast. Calabasas Mansion Urban Counterpole. In November 2021, Nas purchased a property in Calabasas for around $3.5 million. The number sounds modest compared to the tens of millions commonly seen in the entertainment world, but do not rush to judge. The land spans 10 acres set on a private hillside far enough to escape the noise of Los Angeles, yet close enough to reach every power center of the West Coast. In real estate circles, this is known as the West Coast Crown Jewel. No flash, but those who know, know. Stepping inside, the first feeling is not overwhelm, but control. Ceilings at roughly 10 feet create just the right sense of openness, not showy, but enough to slow every movement. Thick, heavy alderwood doors close with a deep, satisfying sound. Cool limestone floors underfoot connect the spaces like a continuous flow. A stone-clad fireplace sits at the center, not as decoration, but as an anchor of warmth within a large home. The kitchen is where Calabasas fully reveals its urban nature. Viking appliances, a separate butler pantry, and a private wine cellar built to host discreet gatherings. This is where decisions are spoken between everyday conversations. No club lights, no overly loud music, just the confidence of people who do not need to prove who they are. The outdoor space is where this property truly earns its value. A built-in BBQ area for intimate get-togethers. A spa and fire pit placed off to the side, private enough to separate from the pool. And then comes the unmistakable highlight, a pool grotto with a waterfall and slide. A detail that might sound flashy yet is handled with restraint, like a reminder that this is still California, still a place where enjoyment is allowed. The master suite is a world of its own. An enclosed sauna, a soaking tub placed beside the window, where the last light of day pours in. 2 separate walk-in closets large enough to hold both fashion and memory. A private gym, no need to step outside. A sunset-facing balcony, where each afternoon the sun sinks behind the Calabasas hills, a scene that feels very Hollywood, yet is viewed through the eyes of someone who has seen too much already. In terms of systems, the house operates like a complete organism. An internal elevator. A garage for 8 cars. Not for show, just enough for use. Seamless indoor-outdoor audio allowing one track to follow you from the living room to the pool. Multi-layer security. Multi-zone climate control, each space breathing at its own rhythm. Calabasas is not where Nas seeks absolute quiet. It is where he engages with the world. A necessary opposite to Decatur. One side is land trees and silence. The other is stone glass and power. And standing between those two worlds is Nas, a man who has learned not to let any space swallow him whole. This is not just a house. It is a statement that the King of New York understands the rules of California very well. Car collection. A refined pleasure of the wealthy Nas does not own cars in a way that flaunts quantity, but each one speaks clearly about who he is. Not the kind of rapper who collects cars like trophies. Nas chooses cars the way he chooses words. Few, precise, intentional. If houses show how someone lives, then cars reveal how they truly move through life. And in Nas's collection, you can see 3 distinct slices of who he is, so clear they need no narration. Cadillac Escalade, the mobile throne. The Escalade is the most powerful vehicle in Nas's garage, but not in a flashy way. This is the car for family, for touring, for long days filled with movement. In hip-hop culture, the Escalade is not a random choice. It is like a moving throne, tall, wide. When you step out, you do not need to look up at anyone. On the outside, the Escalade embodies classic American presence. A large body, squared lines painted black or dark tones to maintain discretion. The interior is where the Nas spirit truly comes through. Premium leather seats as wide as sofas. Rear rows spacious enough for family or crew without feeling cramped. The sound system is tuned for listening, not shouting. This is where Nas revisits Beats Talks contracts, or simply sits quietly watching the city slide past the windows. The on-road price of a high-trim, fully optioned Escalade can easily reach $120,000 to $150,000 USD. But for Nas, this is not excess spending. It is an investment in stability, in control. While many rappers choose 2-seat supercars to prove wealth, Nas chooses a vehicle with room for loved ones. That is the first difference. Custom Purple, BMW M3. The joy of precision. If the Escalade represents power, the Custom Purple, BMW M3 reveals a side few get to see. This is the car for driving pleasure, for flair and finesse. The M3 has always been an icon of balance between performance and control, but the Custom Purple paint turns it into something deeply personal. Not common, not mass market, and not for the insecure. The exterior does not need an aggressive body kit. The color alone defines the personality. Inside, it stays true to German philosophy. Clean, driver-focused, hugging seats, a firm steering wheel, every button exactly where it should be. This is a car Nas can drive himself. No chauffeur, no escort, just him and the road. The price of a custom M3 like this, including options and personalization, easily lands around $90,000 to over $100,000 USD. but the real value lies in the experience. This is the car for savoring every turn of the wheel, every rise in engine revs. It shows that Nas does not just like being driven, he likes to drive. He enjoys control in his own hands. AMG Mercedes 190E 1988. A legacy not for every day. The car that speaks most about Nas's depth is also the one he drives the least. The 1988 Mercedes 190E AMG. An icon of analog motorsport. No large screens, no layers of driving assistance, just machinery feel and history. The exterior of the 190E AMG carries the beauty of another era. Compact, angular, not trying to impress. The interior is pure classic Mercedes, leather wood analog gauges. Everything demands that the driver understand the car. Nothing does the work for you. This is not a daily driver. This is a car to be respected. Market prices for a 1988 190E AMG vary widely today, but a clean original example can reach $200,000 USD or more. Nas keeps this car not to show off, but to remember. To remember that everything once began with pure mechanics, with analog, with humans listening to machines. So where does Nas stand compared to others? Looking at Jay-Z, we see rare supercars with astronomical prices, symbols of financial dominance. Looking at Rick Ross, we see massive Rolls-Royce cars, wealth displayed in unmistakable Miami fashion. No one is wrong. But Nas is different. His collection does not say, "I am rich." It says, "I know who I am." Nas does not chase trends. He does not hoard hypercars. He does not need a vehicle that makes others pull out their phones. Every car in his garage has a purpose. The Escalade for family and work. The M3 for driving joy. The 190E AMG for legacy. None are extra. None exist just to be displayed. And right here, Nas's level becomes crystal clear. Class is not about the highest price tag. It is about perfect alignment between person and object. Nas's cars are like his music. Quiet. No explanation needed. But those who understand deeply. Assets and cash flow. Playing the long game. If you only look at the surface, it is easy to think Nas is rich because he is a legend. But that is just the visible layer. What truly sets Nas apart is not how much money he makes, but how he preserves it and lets it grow over time. By the year 2025, many estimates place Nas's net worth at over $80 million US. That figure did not come from a lucky break. It is the result of playing a long game where every decision carries consequences years down the line. The biggest turning point lies in Nas understanding early on that music was only the first stream of income, not the final one. When he invested in Ring back in 2014, it was not a trend-driven move. It was a clear-headed observation. A product solving a real security concern. A market large enough to scale. And a few years later, when Amazon acquired Ring at a valuation of over $1 billion USD, Nas did not need to brag. The cash flow spoke for him. This is wealth without noise. Alongside technology investments, Nas held tightly to what lay at the core. Ownership of the Illmatic masters is a classic example. In an industry where many artists lose control over their own work, Nas kept his. That means every stream, every use of the album in films, trailers, or commercials still sends money back to him. Not explosive, but steady and durable. This is the kind of income that grows more valuable with time. Today, streaming is no longer something to show off. For Nas, it is a quiet current. Combined with touring and merchandise revenue, he built a financial base strong enough not to rely on a single source. When he is not touring, money still comes in. When he does not release new music, Illmatic still lives. That is the difference between making money and building a money system. Another critical piece is Queensbridge Venture Partners. Nas is not just a face on the fund, he is actively involved. The fund has invested in over 100 companies spanning technology, education, and fintech. What stands out is that Nas does not chase the flashiest deals. He chooses businesses with longevity. Queensbridge clearly reflects Nas's mindset. Diversified, patient, never putting everything on one card. When it comes to endorsements, Nas is just as selective, Partnerships with Hennessy and other premium brands are not short-term flexes. They reinforce the image of a mature, layered, and trustworthy artist. He is not the type to put his face on every product. Every name associated with Nas must fit the long story he is building. Beyond music, Nas also steps into acting, documentary production, and luxury collaborations. These rarely dominate his income immediately, but they play a strategic role. They expand influence and keep the name Nas present across multiple spaces. When someone is an artist, an investor, and a producer at once, they are not trapped in a single cycle. Most important of all is philosophy. For Nas, money is not the destination. Money is a tool to buy freedom. Freedom to choose projects, freedom to say no, freedom to disappear when needed. Every dollar he earns comes with a question. Where does this place me in 5 years? In 10 years? That is how someone raised in Queensbridge views money. No romanticizing, no fear, just a resource to be managed. Because of that, Nas does not need to win big on every move. He just needs to avoid losing in the long run. In a world where many rappers explode and then vanish, Nas chooses to move slowly, deliberately, and strategically. His wealth is not a number to brag about. It is proof of a carefully calculated way of living. And when you look at the full picture, you understand why Nas is not just rich, he is sustainably rich. But no one is perfect. And Nas, too, had painful falls. Fall and triumph, taxes and Angola. Every legend slips at some point. For Nas, those stumbles did not come from the stage, but from something far colder. Paperwork, numbers, and the law. No spotlights, no cheers. Just the bare truth that fame does not exempt anyone from the system. In the late 2000s, while Nas's image was still tied to tours and musical legacy, a different story was unfolding behind the scenes. In 2009, the Internal Revenue Service confirmed that Nas owed approximately $2.5 million in back taxes. Not a typo. Real money. And the first warning sign. 2 years later, in 2011, that number rose to $6.4 million. No noise, no sensational scandal, just dry documents sent to a very real address. By 2012, the IRS began directly withholding royalties from Nas's music. Every dollar that should have flowed from past glory was intercepted midway. This is the moment that breaks many artists. Because it is not just about losing money. It is the feeling of your own work turning its back on you. Illmatic was still being played, still being streamed, but the money no longer went straight into its owner's pocket. This is a darker side of fame that rarely gets discussed. You can stand on stage like a king. But when the IRS knocks, you are still just a citizen with unfinished financial obligations. Nas did not run. He did not go online to fight back. He handled it in silence, in a very characteristic way. Because in Queensbridge, people learn that the more you panic, the higher the cost. If the tax story revealed the cold nature of the system, the Angola incident in 2011 exposed another side. A tour, a scheduled show, and then everything collapsed before it even began. Nas's concert in Angola did not happen. The local promoter was arrested, and Nas, instead of flying out like an international star, was placed under house confinement for 49 days. 49 days, no stage, no full crew. No freedom of movement as usual, just time. And a lot of questions. To the public, it was an incident. To those inside it, it was an experience powerful enough to change perspective. When you are used to doors opening because of your name being confined in a foreign house is a real shock. More importantly, Nas did not choose to place blame. Even though he was not the direct cause, he refunded around $300,000 to audiences and related parties. No loud PR, no moral speeches, just a decisive action. For Nas' reputation is not negotiable. Once money has been taken for a show that did not happen, that money no longer belongs to you. These two events, taxes and Angola, placed Nas in a very different position. No longer about dissing someone on a beat. No longer about winning or losing in hip-hop culture. These were real-life tests. And they arrived right as he stood between two chapters. One side was past glory. The other was the path of investing and long-term wealth building. What stands out is that Nas did not turn these falls into a tragic narrative. He did not use them to complain. He handled them, learned the lessons, and kept moving. It was after these periods that Nas became more cautious with cash flow, more alert legally, and sharper in controlling assets. It is no coincidence that in the years following he leaned heavily into investing ownership and building a more durable financial system. A legend in the end is not someone who never falls. A legend is someone who falls without losing themselves. Nas went through courtrooms without spotlights, days of restricted freedom, and numbers large enough to keep anyone awake at night. And it was precisely in those moments that true character was revealed, not on stage, but in how a person faces a system far larger than themselves. Defining true luxury. Looking back at Nas's entire journey, one thing is clear. This is not the story of someone who always wins. It is the story of someone who is not defined by failure. Between legend and human being, Nas stands at a rare balance point. He does not deify himself.
I think what really
Nor
makes
does he
this
force
song
himself
special to
to
me,
appear ordinary. On stage, he is an icon, a voice that shaped an entire generation of hip-hop, a name that makes New York spoken with respect. But when he steps away from the lights, Nas does not live as an untouchable figure.
and although it
He
may
faces
have seemed that
taxes,
this teenager
financial
in New York,
mistakes, days of restricted freedom in a foreign country, bills, decisions, and consequences that are deeply human. And it is in that space that the real Nas appears. This balance does not come naturally. It is built over time.
but he
Through
uses the
moments of
shooting
near
to make
collapse,
commentary on our
through learning
worlds
when
apart.
to stay silent and when to speak. Nas understands the difference between being celebrated and being free. The stage gives him applause, silence gives him clarity, and he needs both. If there is one theme running through this journey, it is
So
resilience.
truth is just
Not the kind
where
of
you
forcing
call each other,
yourself
right?
up after
Truth.
every
Words,
fall,
what it really
but the
means to
ability
have a New
adapt
York
without
state of
losing
mind.
your core. Nas does not try to return to being the 20-year-old of Illmatic. He also does not chase new trends to prove he is still relevant. He evolves, slowly, with intention, and with responsibility for his own choices. Georgia shows us a Nas who knows how to step back. Calabasas shows us a Nas who still understands the rules of power. The car collection tells the story of someone who does not need to show off to prove class. Cash flow and investments show an artist who learned how not to let art become a financial burden. And the false taxes remind us that no success is exempt from reality. At the end of the journey, the question is no longer how rich Nas is, or how much real estate he owns. The real question is this: what does Nas live by? And the answer is clear. His greatest luxury is not a larger house or a more expensive car. His greatest luxury is choice. Choosing when to appear, choosing when to disappear, choosing which projects deserve his time, choosing to say yes, and more importantly, choosing to say no. In a world where so many people are trapped in proving themselves every day,
Illmatic
Nas is
starts
proof
off
that
with the
true
genesis,
value
the
lies in
inward
no longer
guidance in
needing
the
to
music
prove
industry.
anything. When you have built enough foundation, you do not need to run. You just need to move in the right direction. And if at times you must stop, you stop without fear of being left behind. Nas's journey does not end here,
Felt that
but
he
the emotional
needed a track that
circle
was
is
not like
complete.
the other. Chord for
From the tight
album
confines
that day,
of Queensbridge to open spaces, from the noise of the stage to intentional silence, from legend in the eyes of others to peace chosen for himself. That is the definition of true luxury. If you find this story worth reflecting on, like the
After
video,
hearing
subscribe
what
to the
DJ
channel,
Premier
and
did
share it
on
with
Memory
those who are
Lane,
also
Q-Tip
searching for a
knew
way of
that he
living
had
that
to
is
bring the
quiet
heat,
but
which he
sustainable.
absolutely did.
Because who knows,
One
in this
time for your
world full
mind.
of noise, the greatest luxury we may need is the right to live by our own choices.
Stories like this, they leave a mark. If you want to keep digging into the truth and honor the legends, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You are now locked in with the Black Vault. What's your take on this? Let me know in the comments. Today's content may reference public figures, businesses, or social events. However, all mentions are intended for exploratory purposes only and are not meant as accusations or judgments.